Miss Natasha Todorovic. Welcome to the Rich Equation Podcast.
It is awesome to be with you, Ashish.
It is always good to see you. Just for the audience really quick, Natasha and I have known each other just for a few months, but I've learned so much from Natasha. She is a change expert. I won't call you a consultant. You can define yourself, but really focusing on change and expansion and growth, not only in your business and how to lead change within your business, within your teams, but also in your mind, here in our minds. And so it's been really fun to get to know her and get to engage with her in the different projects that we're both doing together. But I'm just so impressed with how you're constantly learning, how you're constantly trying new things. And you're setting the example of, we always have to keep learning and trying things and changing and adapting. And so I guess let's start off with spiral dynamics, because I think that, and you and I talked about this, I think this is a really important concept for people. And I don't think I've ever talked about it on the podcast before. Explain to people, what is spiral dynamics? Give us some of the psychotherapy understanding of it too, because I think there's some gold in this concept. I really want people to look it up, look Natasha up, look up this concept, because it's such a great framework for why I wanted you here today. And again, it's a topic that we've not yet talked about here. I have been exposed about this before. I talked to you about that. And I've gone through some of that exercises for myself personally, not in my business, but in my personal life. So I'd love you to kind of frame the conversation with at least that. What is spiral dynamics?
Oh, Ashish, it is so many things. And I have had people in our world define it as a way of life, but it is not. Very simply, it is our brand. My late husband wrote the best-selling book, Spiral Dynamics, Mastering Values, Leadership, and Change. We deliver training, consulting services, and assessment services under that brand. But the metaphor that really captures people's imagination around this brand is spiral, meaning the evolution of our human nature as individuals, but also in the way that we organize. And there are a bunch of colors, and it's a very pretty logo and all of that. But what I'd like you to imagine is there was a time in our history when we were wandering the savanna grasslands and we were hunting maybe with spears and sticks and clubs and all of that. And that kind of a human was the very basic kind of starter human upon whose shoulders we built our ways of organizing. So that evolved. And there was a period of our history where we were settling around campfires and telling stories and believing in spirits and giving sacrifices to the gods and goddesses and little godlings. And there was a period in our history when the Vikings were just conquering the world. And there was a period in our history where we just built this whole entire sort of monotheistic bunches of religions, and we were trying to dominate other cultures and make them believe. And then there was a period in our history, the Industrial Revolution. And each of these periods in our history not only changed the way that we organized, our psychology changed, the way we process neurologically and biologically changed, the way we related to one another changed. And that, in a nutshell, is the story of human development. That's the spiral side. The dynamic side is how we change. And how do we grow from system to system? How do we transform? How do we shift? How do we support one another? How do we grow as individuals? How do we grow as groups? How do we grow as organizations? How do we form culture? And how do we deal with these tectonic shifts, particularly those that we're going through now? I don't think there's ever been a time in our history where we've been needing to shift and change and pivot and take stock and try new things faster than we are today. So that's the spiral, human nature, and the dynamics is how we change.
So as we evolve, is that a fair statement that as we evolve, we I mean, I'm trying to pull up an image if you're watching this on YouTube that maybe you can see. I don't know if you have something that we could pull up because
I
here we
have
go.
so
This is
many,
you
and
have so
I'm not on
many.
this platform.
It's okay. Here, I'll pull it up. I think there's let's see. Maybe I can pull this up and you can just comment just conceptually. I'm sure I just googled this really quick. So this is not something that is
Yep,
of
that's
your
our spiral.
content, but it's close enough, right?
Absolutely borrowing our
Oh, I'm
content.
sure everyone is stealing yours. I just look
A
at all these
lot of
images that people are
people
stealing your
are.
content.
You are absolutely right. There's so many people who are, yeah, but that's exactly what we're talking about.
Okay,
We're
so
talking about
kind of
the
walk
base,
us through
full,
what are the
yeah.
different levels and how do we know what level we're on?
And that is $1 million question. So we have a suite of psychometrics that we do certification in. Now, I think a lot of people, they'll hear a color and they'll go, oh, well, that's like. And I like to use the metaphor. I don't know how often you do this. I hope you do this more often than I imagine you do, Ashish, which is lie in a field, looking up at the clouds, and then just kind of projecting what the clouds look like. And that's what most people do with this spiral. When
Hmm.
Chris created the colors, what he was trying to do was he was trying to take some very complex notions and build them into something that the average human could at least touch slightly. So the colors do kind of represent a very shorthand of some of these stages and phases of development. And how we tell, well, if we want to do it accurately, then we use assessments and we do some interviewing protocols that we've developed, and we do elicitations and those pieces. And it's not so much what color am I? Right?
Yeah.
The question is, how do I see the world? How do I learn? How do I construct my view of reality? How do I relate to others given the neurology and the biology and the psychology that I come with? And how do I leverage that as a leader to engage others in their transformation? How do I
Hmm.
leverage that as a team member and dig into the world as the environment, right? In, not N, environment of those that I'm working with as team members, and become the most productive team member I can be for this group and bring out the potential of those who I am honored enough to be in the lives of.
Hmm. So it kind of helps to understand people from where they show up in this spiral dynamics framework, name it to tame it, if you will, so that I
Mhm.
can understand not only myself, but I can understand my other teammates. Let's take this into actual companies and leadership. Um, I know you work with a lot of companies. You're doing actually you're actually brilliant at sales too. So we'll talk about sales maybe at the end because I'd love you to share some of your sales strategies and how you're bringing people into your funnel and your process. There's a lot of entrepreneurs listening here, so that's always a fun thing to always learn, right? But
Absolutely.
in regard to the businesses that say, "Yes, Natasha, I want this, I need this." What are the challenges that they have? What are the common threads of those challenges? And let's start there.
Well, I have so many examples coming to mind. One of the things that we do as humans is we go, well, I'm human, so I get other humans until we make human messes. And by that time, we've kind of scrambled a few eggs and things have kind of fallen apart. As an example, in the world of mergers and acquisitions, about 40
Mm,
years ago, 67 to 87% of mergers and acquisitions failed.
mm,
Why? Due to culture. What is
mm,
culture? It is human relationship systems. And so I asked a number of M&A experts, what are you guys doing about culture? And they're like, interesting. And then they kept going. And who holds the bag at the other end of that merger or acquisition? It's the CEO. And on the other side of those mergers and acquisitions, 85% of CEOs wished that they'd paid more attention to the people side of things.
Of course.
And we have, and this has come about from my many years of doing certifications in this approach and working with people and working with organizations. What I've found is that we are blind to the people stuff. So, you kind of go, well, what do you mean? Natasha, I can see you. I can see your eyes. I can see your mouth moving. I can hear you. What do you mean we're blind? I see you. We see each other. There are underlying things that in our relating and connecting that are invisible to us. And when we're working well together, who cares? But when things start to get harder or tougher, there are all kinds of things that get in the way. There's our belief systems. There are our values and our valuing systems. There's our emotional load and the way we handle that with one another. And then there are these developmental flows. And if the world is more complex than I can deal with, I'm going to resist. I might pull back. I might hold back. I might swirl in confusion. If I was your leader and you happen to be, let's say, and this isn't you, but let's say you were the kind of person who's like, Natasha, just tell me what to do. Right. And I was working with one leader who had a team that was like, just tell me what to do. And the leader's like, no, go figure it out on your own. Be creative. Give me something new and different. And in the background, they were going, this leader is really bad. This leader doesn't know what they're doing. If they knew what they were doing, they'd tell us what to do. Right? So leaders and followers come together based on these developmental flows. And all of these pieces, our values, our beliefs, our emotional reaction to things, the way the world is structured, our capacity to deal with that world, our capacity to deal with one another, all impact our abilities to A, see one another, B, react congruently to a situation, and C, be able to get to the goals that we want to as organizations and as groups.
I mean, this is an ongoing thing. This is not like, oh yeah, let's go fix this in 90 days. This is like an ebb and flow. This is a constant work in progress. I mean, before we recorded a couple months ago, we talked about this, you and I, about the fact that, we continue to invest in our team, but the things that we're teaching or focusing on, it's so amazing how you just revert kind of back to old bad behaviors. And then, okay, you're bringing a new concept and a new subject matter that you want them to learn. And then after that cycle, those habits start to come back too. So it really is a constant work in progress. But I think one of the most powerful things that we've learned is the dynamic of the team is more important than the technical skills. And that's probably what you're talking about in terms of the M&A, because when you're looking at an M&A deal, you're looking at, okay, how am I going to make money here? What operating costs am I going to merge, right? What am I going to synergize? Who's going to stay over there? Who's going to stay over here? Who am I going to cut? Which customer is going to hire? Rather than how is that human being and that human being going to work together?
Yeah.
How are they going to solve those problems, right? And I think that's a huge trap. It's also, and maybe you can call BS on me, it's also the hardest part.
It is the hardest part. So I think one of the terms has been the soft skills, right? And I remember one executive saying, oh my gosh, you're not going to do the pink fuzzy stuff with us, are you? And it's like, dude, if you don't get these essential skills, you are not going to lead your team. You are not going to be able to get them to the goals and the outcomes. You are going to come in over budget, over time, and you are not going to be the leader that you have been hired to be for this team. And in fact, This particular team had been in the background plotting the overthrow of this particular executive.
Do you feel like that trend is changing? Do you feel like that stale leadership mindset, then, I don't have a good analogy for what, just like the cubicle mindset, let's call it that.
Mhm. I think there are different groups of people and different kinds of leaders that fit those groups of people. I
Right.
believe that leaders are chosen by their people. They are not created. They are not
Really?
born. They are congruent with the
Mm,
people that they are leading. And you know as
I
well as
love
I
that.
do, just because you have a title or just because you can sign a check doesn't mean you are the leader for your people. It just means you have some positional power. When people lean into trust you and they lean into do what you say and they lean into you as an example, and you can build a culture where they feel free to contribute. And what I believe is, and we've seen this in the research, is that leadership is congruence between follower and leader, whatever that congruence is. And there are some tasks and some organizations where that old fashioned command and control leadership is critical. Is that everywhere? No. And with the complexity of the problems that we need to deal with, and some people call them wicked problems, and there are all kinds of terminologies, but with the kinds of problems we're dealing with today, we need more talent. And people who are super smart don't need somebody to tell them what to do. People who are super smart need to know how to cohere together in the healthiest ways so their thinking process can evolve and develop, so they can work together to in a collaborative, and I'm not saying collective, and I'm not saying cooperative. I'm saying in a collaborative way where the sum of their parts becomes bigger than all of them together.
Mm.
And when we can get that, that's a different kind of leader than if you're, I don't know, in a war zone and he's like a duck because he can see something coming and everybody needs to duck. Right? So there's different
W-
kinds of leaderships for different kinds of groups, for different kinds of complexities of problems that that group, that organization, that leader and team are solving.
What's in it for the team? I mean, maybe from your experience in your data, like, are you able to measure the performance or the cost of not doing this, right? So when a team is really operating at this level and harmonizing and collaborating, you said, or cooperating,
Mhm.
right? If they're
Cooperating is
collaborating,
easy for
co-
humans.
right.
Collaborating is a different thing.
So when they're actually collaborating at the highest level, they're really
Mhm.
in tune with this chemistry. They're creating space for their growth. Is there like is there a 20% growth in business, or is it measurable? Is Are we measuring happiness and peace and sort of harmony? Um and maybe give a story, or give a story of when it all blew up.
Um, yeah. Um, so I remember this particular case where they had a team. IBM had gone in, tried to solve the problem, couldn't solve it. There were department heads who had not spoken to one another in like 5 or 7 years. And it was a pretty large project.
Mm,
And if you can just take any project, right? You've got a goal, you've got a timeline, you've got a budget. What happens? What is the cost of not getting that team to the finish line in time? And so if you've got, I don't know, 15 people and the project is extended by another month and you're paying those 15 people, just amortize that over every day
right,
that your
right.
project is delayed. Now, take all of the costs of your clients not getting that new product or that new software or that new deliverable on time, and then amortize the cost of reputation and the people that they didn't refer you to because you couldn't get that done. So they tried and tried and tried, and it wasn't working. And when we got them in a position where they were understanding one another, where they were understanding the problem, where they were willing to lay down their swords long enough to come together and fix the problem, they
Mm.
came in under budget in less time than it was supposed to take. And these were problems that some big consulting companies couldn't solve because they weren't addressing what was going on underneath. And if you hear a knocking in your car, you go to the dealer and you say, like, check it out, right? But when we hear that same knocking happening in our teams, happening in our organizations, we go, they'll figure it out. We'll get there. We'll work
Mm.
it out. We don't take that human side as seriously as we do our car. And the
Yeah.
costs are much higher.
Right. How do you apply this in your personal life?
Mm. I don't think that there is a moment where this doesn't come in.
Mm.
When you talked about your team, it's like, yeah, they go back to those old behaviors. They go back to the old behaviors because it's not a part of who they've become.
That's right.
And this has sat with me for
Fascinating.
over 2 decades. This is how I work. This is how I see the world. I see patterns happening between people that sometimes I'll point out to others, and they just don't see it until they come back and they go, "Oh my God,
Mm.
Natasha, you called it."
This is, you just said something really profound. I think, it really is about who you are being and who you are becoming and not what you were doing or not what you were learning technically.
Hmm.
So I love, that's why I love this spiral dynamics framework. Is it's so focused on what stage of evolution am I in my beingness,
Yeah.
rather than my skill sets or my job description or my roles and responsibilities or my team dynamics. It's really my being state. And I think that that's where even I am guilty, where I can revert if I'm not keeping that high vibration, or I'm not focusing on that, or I'm not working on who I am being and not what I'm doing. It's so easy to revert. And it's just a human nature too, right? It's a little bit of the reptilian brain. It's just the programming that we have, or not.
Well, when we're thinking about our doing, right? We've got peak energy times, right? We will
Mm.
do better when we are well fed, well slept, where we're at peak energy and we're really enthusiastic about the thing. And if we are not at peak energy, or we've missed meals, or we're eating not so well, and our biology starts to disintegrate a little, then we're not going to be at our peak state, and we're just going to revert to what our energy is able to handle.
Hmm.
So give yourself some grace.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about it. Why are you doing this work? Why is this so important to you?
A few things, Ashish. I think we have some big problems in our world, really big problems. And I'll tell you a little story. When Chris and I mean, we have done hundreds of certifications in this approach around the world with thousands of people. We've done, taken assessment data in Latin America and South Africa and the European countries. And one of the things that we'd ask consistently is we'd ask people whose organization sent them, um, are you contributing 30, 40, how many of you are contributing 30, 40% of your talent, right? About
Mm.
75% of the hands would go up. And then
Wow.
the follow-up question was, how many of your managers are happy? 100% put their hands up. Now, they weren't putting their hands up going, ha, 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 I got one over my manager. They were putting their hands up with sadness and sorrow because
Oh,
what they
okay.
were confessing to and what they were recognizing was that about 30-40% of their potential was going into this work. They came in anticipating that they were not only going to contribute 100% of themselves, but they were going to grow. And as they grew, they'd have greater potential and they'd contribute that. They came into the job wanting to contribute all of themselves.
Mm,
And this environment that we are creating organizationally is forcing people to contribute less of themselves than we would ever expect from an investment or an oil field or anything else that we're expecting production from. And we accept this organizationally from people. So there is a 60%, maybe more, 65% gap, 70% gap in potential, that if we were able to turn that on in our organizations, with our leadership, with our people, with our workforce, we could solve some of the biggest, most pressing problems that humanity has if we'd unleash the power of our innovation, our passion, and our people.
okay, so tell us, it's very, very powerful. I can't believe that. If those statistics are true, that's insane. And I'm just thinking back to like our companies and all the things that I'm working on is like, wow, man. So I guess my next question is like, well, what do I do about that? What does it mean to be the leader that extrapolates all that value for not only their benefit, but for the world's benefit or for their enterprise's benefit? What are the things we should be doing?
I think some of this might sound very pat and small,
I
but we're
think it
not
is. I hopefully it's small and pat. It's like, what are the three easy things? Easy wins.
easy number one, easy number. Well, number one is we are not listening, right? And everybody's like, I listen,
Mm.
Natasha, I listen. It's like,
No,
no, no,
yeah, I'm
you too.
guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. I'll claim it here.
I'm guilty too. Chris was like, I can't even teach you to listen, right? It took him a decade. He's like, I can't teach you to listen, right? But one is we're not listening. Right. So if we're not listening and we're dismissing people, they shut down.
Mm,
Right. So that's number one. Number two, we're not paying enough attention to the way we're building culture. Culture is what tells people how far can we go? What can we do? What are we willing to accept? And if the culture says we want innovation, contribute, and then managers and leaders and other employees are saying, yeah, no, 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 that's not the way we do it here.
mm,
That's shutting down on that innovation that we're saying we want, but we're given two messages. So we have to really think about what are the messages that are being delivered in the culture? How are people being treated? And when they have ideas that go outside the system, and I know every time I have hit the limits of these human relationship systems, because that's where you're getting some of the pushback. That's
yeah.
where you're getting the, we don't do it that way around here, or that's not the way it's been done, or no, no, that won't work, or our customers don't or won't, right? We get the quote excuses, which we need to listen to, but we also need to ask ourselves that might have been true last month or a year ago or a decade ago. Is that still true now? And how do we know this? And
Mm,
have we tested? Have we asked our customers? Did we ask in ways that invite the kind of feedback we want? And how many
mm,
times have you asked somebody for feedback and then they kind of give you what you want? And it's
mm.
like, no, there's more there. They're not giving you what you want because the signaling has been, give me what I want, not what I need to hear.
One of the things that I've observed more as I get older, I don't know why this is showing up for me now, but I see so many people either in their personal relationships or in their business relationships, colleagues that have worked together for a longer period of time. And over time, when you start a fresh new relationship, you're highly engaged, you're highly innovative, everybody's excited. There's new things happening all the time. And then over time, I think you get better, you get more mature, things become more normalized, more mature. But the almost this like sense of, well, that's just who they are type of mindset starts to show up. It starts to trickle in. People, I won't say there's resistance, but when you know that, hey, that person is either slipping or that person is not continuously stepping into their next 70% of growth, that's just who they are. They just kind of plateaued. What do you have to say to that? Um, Not only in just all interpersonal relationships, and how can you guide people? What could you tell us? How should we be thinking or engaging with that type of relationship? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I like your term plateau. And I'd ask you, when you're in that kind of relationship, do you see that person show up differently when they're with other people?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'd say yes. My first instinct is say yes, but I'm looking for proof why that's wrong. But let's stick with
Well, and you
yes.
might have somebody in mind. So,
I mean,
Ashish,
just no, I see it. I'm
yeah.
actually seeing this, which is why I'm glad I'm asking the question, because right now I'm seeing it in many parts of my life.
Mhm.
And even me myself, of like I noticed that my relationship with certain people is starting to plateau, where now I don't want to use the energy or the invest in that relationship to figure out, okay, where's that next place for us to go, right? And so what should how should I be thinking about that?
Well, I think that it's a very complicated question. We go through ebbs and flows, and
Yeah.
relationships that were amazing at some point sometimes fall apart. And sometimes we have
Mm.
to ask ourselves the most energy consumptive thing we can do as humans is be in relationship with other humans.
Yeah. I hear
Right?
that.
That takes most of our energy. And when we can coast, that's a conservation of energy. And
Mm.
does it mean that we want to coast? Does it mean that we can't take it up a notch? Does it mean that we can't invite new relationships? There are a lot of different things that we can do. When teams are in that kind of coasting place, that's when some really great training can help them to see one another in different ways. I mean, it doesn't matter if you do spiral dynamics training or Myers Briggs or whatever. Training is designed to open up our eyes to new potentials. Training isn't designed necessarily to do big, long behavior change, but
Mm.
it is designed to enable us to see new things, to glimpse new pathways, to get a behavior change. That takes consistency, coaching, support, leadership, insistence that the behavior change sticks. So I would
Yeah.
just, there are a few things that are happening. One is what's happening inside the individual, right? What's happening in their biology, their neurology, their psychology, the way they see the world, their beliefs. Two is what's happening in the social, environmental, social relationship systems around them. Are they also trying to conserve energy? Are they also given messages of grow or you are the way you are? Because at some point we stop fighting things.
Mm.
We go, that's that's as you said, the way they are. We're not going to fight them anymore, and we let them
Yeah.
go, and they stop fighting, right? And then there, those messages in the environment tell us who we are and who we are expected to be, and that's when some people go, you know what? I've been, how did I hear it? That soul sucking corporate work. I'm done with it. Now I can be me. Well, that soul sucking corporate work that the person endured was them coasting because that's what they were told. And then the third thing is the close relationships. Who are we in that relationship? And when we start looking at those multiple pieces, then we can begin to understand the human being as they are. And some people don't want to grow. They're happy with who they are. They
Yeah.
don't want to change. And other people are like, oh, Thank goodness, Ashish, you brought this because I've been waiting for this.
How do you deal with that when you experience it where people are not interested or willing to change? Have you come to terms with that, like just in terms of acceptance? Or what
I
advice do you have for people in that regard?
I pick my battles. So, sometimes I'll look at some of my friends and,
Change is hard. I'm not undermining it either. It is hard.
yeah, like, I'll look at some of my friends and I'm like, there's a calculus, right? And there's a calculus that goes, if they did this, or if they had this happen, or if they adopted this, they'd be much happier.
Mm,
Am I the one to do this? How is our friendship going to be altered if I do that? And I've had friendships crack apart because I've put the effort into things that they didn't want changed.
yeah.
Right. So I've gotten smarter at picking my
Yeah.
battles.
Self-awareness is important. You gotta have self-awareness, and you gotta have some, not only self-compassion, but compassion and acceptance for other people.
And if I'm working with a client and the client says this is what they want, and we've done all of the measures and we've got the data and we've gone over the data, I will obviously expend a lot more effort there than I will with a friend. Right? I'm
Mm,
much more willing to accept my friends as they are. And then in a client engagement, I will, bend over 110% to make sure that those goals are achieved. And fortunately, I've had a very rich life where I've been able to build a lot of skills that help leaders and their teams and the team's relationships become very transformational. And, some of my friends have said, oh my gosh, Natasha, you've got like x ray vision. You see things that other people don't see. And you said earlier, I won't call you a consultant. And sometimes in my mind, I'm like, I'm just knitting these people back together again so that they can, in healthy ways,
mm.
deal with these challenges.
Well,
Because
I really am. Huh?
because you take out that,
No, I love that.
head
I love
money.
that way you said that. Yeah, you're right. Is that even in organizations, you have to weave them all together like a beautifully, like a Kevlar fabric
Yeah,
that's bulletproof, that's nicely tight. There's no spaces, no air. That takes chemistry, that takes hard work, that takes communication, it takes understanding, it takes the human side of us. Not, it's often not the technical.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I think all the work you're doing is amazing. I think you're amazing. I think people are lucky that there are people out there that are working on these types of problems to try to make organizations in the world a better place. I know that sounds super cliche, but it's the damn truth. And honestly, leaders can't do it themselves. Like I if I could do this myself, I wouldn't be where I am. I'd be much farther along. You have to bring people in who just focus on these things, and that's their specialty. They're really coming from that human connection side. And actually it also helps, I'd love you to speak to this, is like it also helps to bring somebody from the outside to talk about it. Where it's not your leader saying, "Well, this is the way I want to do it." It's like somebody else say like, "This is all I do.
Mhm.
This is all I do, and this is the only part I do for all companies all across the world." So there's just this level of authority that comes when you're bringing that to the conversation within teams, and I think teams are very receptive to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, the outside voice is a voice that enables you to see yourselves differently.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to say to leaders, such as yourself, is I'll say, I am not working for you. I am working for your relationship systems and the health of your relationship
Mm.
systems. So the client is the relationship system with the objective of ensuring that it is healthy and productive. And that enables me to give you some truths and to look at, to reveal from our perspective, from our data, from our conversations with key stakeholders, some things that might be going on that you didn't see because we see it. And then what we do is sort of reveal the relationship system to itself.
Mm.
And it's not like, a Natasha comes in and says, we're going to change you. We come in and we work together to figure out, given this is the next step. This is the next step for this system.
Mm. I love it. You're also learning a lot on sales. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that because you and I are both on this journey right now. I don't know if you what you feel like sharing, but you are so innovative and you're on the forefront with me, I guess, but really you're leading the way of just new sales technologies, ways to sell product, ways to message things. I mean, what keeps you fueling on that side to constantly keep learning about how to, and you're learning, let me just say, you're learning very innovative and fresh sales strategies. Considering you've been in business for so long, you really don't have to do that. You could probably use very archaic systems, but what is driving you and what are you learning through that process?
Well, look, Ashish, the world is changing and it
Yeah, it
is
is.
changing rapidly. And reaching our I'll share a brief story with you. When Chris and I were working the way we used to work, particularly for training, not so much with our consulting, but with training, we kind of said, well, whoever comes, comes, right? They are our clients. We will do our best to serve. And before he died, we were having a conversation about the way we were doing our business and how we were conveying our work. And it was a conversation we'd had many times. But what made this particularly profound was on the day we had this conversation, it was a week before he died.
Mm,
So he knew he was dying. And if you're dying, there are a lot of conversations you can have, right? And one of them generally isn't, it is unethical to serve our customers the way we've been serving them.
mm,
Because, and this has to do with the projections and the misuse and abuse of spiral dynamics in the marketplace. We
mm,
knew that there's so many people trying to play spiral dynamics games and doing harm. And it stayed with me
mm,
because I researched what people understood and what they were taking away and what they were doing. And it was very upsetting to us both. And because of the way technology is shaping our brains, our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. We have more and more that is overwhelming us and demanding our attention. Our attention is split into a million different places. And you layer COVID on top of that with people who've had long COVID who can't think the way they used to think. Our attention spans, in some estimates, are shorter than a goldfish's, right? So the old way of reaching customers, I can't go knock on a door anymore. I can't go pick up a phone and call someone and say, hey, I just worked down the street from you. Let me stop in, right? And people have phones. They look at the phone, they recognize the number and they want to talk to the people or the person. They'll pick it up. Otherwise it goes to voicemail. And then maybe they forget to check voicemail for a week, right? So the way people are doing their lives demands that we change the way we approach them, the way we sell them, and the way we work with them. Because once
mm,
people go, this is a thing and I'm going to pay attention, it then becomes intentional.
mm. I
But it
love it.
takes more touches, it takes more realness from one another. It takes more relating, and we've gotten worse at relating through COVID. And it just takes somebody going, I'm going to pay attention to this
I'm
thing.
gonna pay attention. Yeah, so powerful. I think you're spot on. We definitely have to rethink a lot of things.
And there are more options than ever. And it is harder than ever to sort through the crap and to get to the good stuff.
Let's tell tell the audience if they want to connect with you, if they want to learn more, what's the best place to find you or connect with you?
Best place to find me is at spiraldynamics.org. And so you can email me. That's Natasha, Natasha, at spiraldynamics.org.
You're amazing. Last question for you. What does it mean to live a rich life?
I believe that living a rich life means having rich relationships, living up to your full potential, and then going beyond that and surprising yourself,
Mm,
and contributing positively to those around you so their potential grows.
I love it. I honor you for the work you're doing. I appreciate you coming on here today. I'm lucky to call you a friend. Congratulations on all the things that you're doing and all the people that you're helping. Such a good conversation. This is a really important topic, guys. Definitely reach out. Definitely do some Googling. The spiral dynamics concept is incredibly powerful. As Natasha said, she's the proprietary owner of the concept. So if you're finding some other, if you're finding it somewhere else, be weary. Make sure you're going to the right place to learn it. And yeah, thanks so much, darling. Appreciate it.
Ashish, it has been an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Peace.